You never want to be in the business of attaching a garden hose to a fire hydrant. When it comes to supply chain, that's a situation you do not want to be in, and we're finding ourselves in that position right now.
Hello and welcome to this edition of the State of Soy. I'm Aaron Putsey. I'm visiting with Mike Steenhoek. Mike serves as the Executive Director of the Soy Transportation Coalition. And Mike, obviously you have been putting out quite a bit of information here, really stating the severity right now of the low river levels and their impact on moving crops and also moving inputs. Tell us a little bit right now just about the state of where we find ourselves with river levels moving from fall into winter.
Well, the metaphor I like to use, and I've continued to use it today, it's very applicable, is you never want to be in the business of attaching a garden hose to a fire hydrant. When it comes to supply chain, that's a situation you do not want to be in, and we're finding ourselves in that position right now. You've got farmers growing a pretty strong and robust crop throughout the country, including in the state of Iowa. It's not going to be a record, but it's still going to be a very strong crop. But then, unfortunately, we've got a supply chain that is not currently equipped to fully accommodate what farmers are growing. So it's kind of like attaching that garden hose to a fire hydrant. And it's quite pronounced on our inland waterway system, particularly the Mississippi River. You know, we've had persistent lack of precipitation throughout the whole area, throughout the entire Midwest for that matter. And what that's resulted in is low water conditions on this maritime highway that under normal conditions is exceptional at moving freight from point A to point B in an economical manner. It's one of the reasons why we're so competitive, but unfortunately we're having these low water conditions. It's really impacting the efficiency and economics of barge transportation.
Now, of course, we're adjacent to the Des Moines River, which is also exceptionally low. These are all feeders into that major transportation route for farmers, which is the Mississippi. What are you seeing out there in terms of the economic impact on prices?
When you've got low water conditions, it has an impact in two ways. Number one, channel depth. Number two, channel width. And so with channel depth, you can't load as many soybeans or corn or whatever your freight is per barge out of a concern that you might encounter a grounding. It might scrape the bottom. So for a typical barge where you're putting 50,000, even upwards to 60,000 bushels per barge, every time you have to reduce the water level 1 foot, that results in you putting 5,000 fewer bushels per barge. And we're seeing in stretches of the Mississippi River, you normally may have 12 feet of water depth, or what's commonly referred to as draft, that you have at your disposal. Now the restriction is 9 feet. So you got 3 less feet of water depth, 5,000 bushels fewer per foot. So that all of a sudden means you're putting 15,000 fewer bushels per barge. That impacts channel depth, but also channel width. When you have less water in the system, the shipping channel becomes more narrow. So you can't attach as many barges all together to form one unit that then in turn moves down to an export terminal by New Orleans. Typically, St. Louis on south, you can put 30, 35, 40 barges all connected together. Now the maximum allowance is 25. So when you put those two scenarios together, it dramatically impedes the economics of our barge transportation, and it certainly has an impact on farmer competitiveness in the international marketplace.
Right, because as we know, and as our viewers know, the seller pays the freight, and in this case the farmer, and so it's going to show up in terms of having a negative impact in terms of having to pay more cost because it's taking more time and more labor to move that crop. What can be done? I mean, obviously Mother Nature plays a big part in this, but is there anything that can be done to mitigate this through construction, through locks and dams, through just being able to better manage the flow as we move south of Iowa?
Yeah, unfortunately, Mother Nature really is responsible for this. But I do think there are going to be some lessons when we do the post-mortem on this, that there are some certain things that we can do. It's going to be at the margins, because clearly the culprit for this is a lack of water. The elixir to this will be more precipitation. So that needs to be abundantly clear. But one of the things that I routinely like to express when we talk about transportation issues is that the best time to respond to a catastrophe is before the catastrophe, not after the catastrophe. And so we as a country, we do a pretty good job of responding to catastrophes. We're willing to deploy a lot of resources to mitigate the problems that result from it, but we don't do a very good job of being on the front end. There's a very productive discussion that needs to occur on dredging. Advanced dredging throughout the whole inland waterway system. That's not sexy, but that can certainly go a whole long way to maybe mitigate the impact of this when it occurs again. It's more economical that way. It diminishes human misery as well. So that's something that's a conversation that we look forward to vigorously participating in.
Again, you know, when we talk about precipitation, we talk about water movement, it does have a direct impact on really the fortunes of soybean farmers, not only moving a crop, but also getting inputs up the Mississippi. Certainly something that bears watching here, these water levels, as we move from fall into winter and then pretty soon, before we know it, into another growing season. Reporting for the Iowa Soybean Association in this edition of the State of Soy, I'm Aaron Putsey.
Farming is a competitive business, and you need equipment you can count on every single day. That's why for nearly 90 years, farmers have entrusted their grain handling to Brandt Agricultural Products. Brandt's full line of hardworking conveyors, augers, grain carts, vacs, grain bagging equipment, and tillage equipment are made to deliver the competitive edge you need to lead the field, and are manufactured here in the USA. For more information on our full line of products, visit brandt.ca today.